up, friends? I got it done, and today we're going to be reviewing the debut full-length album by K-pop girl group aespa. Like I said before, this is the debut full-length by K-pop girl group superstars aespa. aespa pretty much hit it off immediately with their debut song Black Mamba back in 2020, just taking the world by storm. I hopped on around when Savage came out, and since then, I think they're probably one of the most experimental and forward-thinking K-pop groups of the fourth generation. While not all of their songs totally live up to that reputation, they have some pretty great projects under their belts, especially their mini albums Savage and My World. Some of their other mini albums like Girls and 2023's Drama that unfortunately I didn't really get to covering, they are a bit less interesting in comparison. However, this newest album from them, their first full-length album Armageddon, goes back into that more interesting direction that I was hoping for them to return to. The first song on the album, the first single, Supernova, is just a perfect start to the record. It's a fantastic evolution to their harsh, dancey direction that they were going with back on their Savage mini album. The whirling synth, the punchy beats, the driving vocals, they just make this track explode with energy. The transitions from verse to chorus and back again are smooth as hell, and I love the synths, like the sound effect beeps and boops and just all of that stuff on this one. It just has a great progression overall. When we get to that dance break after the bridge where they strip the beat back and add that sample, like it's iconic. What can I say? aespa's lyrics are always kind of a toss-up on whether or not they're going to like involve the group's lore or not, or if they're just going to have like a sort of standard lyrical aspect to their songs. This one in particular definitely goes for the lore angle, which is basically them talking about how they are like these doppelgangers or aliens from space that are trying to like descend to Earth and replace the original aespa. So it's kind of crazy, but I think it really does fit this track's vibe. However, even in that interpretation, you can also interpret it normally with them basically just saying how they are here to stay in the current K-pop zeitgeist. Armageddon is the other lead single for the project, and this one was also just fantastic. It's like the gritty cousin of Black Mamba. It has that dirty bass line, crunchy beats, and a very confident vocal style that is super catchy and captivating. Some super smooth flows in both the vocals and the instrumental also really give off a cocky and fun vibe. I also think that the girls' vocal textures really mesh well with this instrumental and the sort of track style as a whole, as even when one member is doing their part, you can hear the other members in the background kind of re-enhancing the overall vibe of the song, kind of adding some force to the verses as well. So like you get their individual moments, but also moments where like all their vocals combine, and it's just really well done. That bridge is also just incredible when the piano comes in and Winter and Ningning harmonize. Like, come on. Again, there's another fucking awesome dance break that comes in after the bridge too. It kind of like gives the song more of a hip hop angle, and like Karina's vocal tone right here, like, come on! They also kind of like extend the chorus in this dance break too, like it's so cool. Set the Tone is another pretty slick one, going for almost like a hardcore hip-hop styled sample, kind of like maybe what like a Beastie Boys would do or something like that. It's really weird and pretty interesting though. It's like very late 80s, 90s, but also very modern in a sense too. It's a really interesting combination of sounds. Giselle especially has a great attitude on this one that really reinforces that instrumental, especially when that sample just kind of like randomly interjects itself into the very jittery flows on this one. Like it's a really kind of punchy experience that I like. And again, I'm loving how much Karina's vocal style fits on this instrumental. She was perfect back in like the spicy, salty, and sweet era, and I think this is just kind of an extension of that. It's a perfect sound for lyrics about the girls basically knowing that they are bad bitches and are just dominating the K-pop charts right now. Mine is also very reminiscent of the Savage era, being this sort of like skeletal trap-oriented song with a sort of ominous aesthetic to it. Winter's more melodic vocal tone also makes for some pretty interesting contrast on this rigid instrumental overall. I also like how she and some instrumental flourishes here add a almost somber undertone to the track too. The piano and synth parts in the bridge also really help enforce this. The song is all about growing up, getting hate, or maybe being uncertain about your future, but just pushing through anyway. The vibes in the instrumental also help illustrate the different emotions that they are feeling as they're going through this, whether it's, you know, sort of like a harsh anger or that sort of undertone of sadness or melancholy in maybe the fact that they are getting hate or just can't seem to reach the goals that they wanted to, even if they are trying. I think both elements work in pretty good harmony here. Next up we got Licorice, and speaking of salty and sweet, this is kind of like the spiritual successor to that one, albeit more in a pop rock direction rather in the fuzzy pop direction of Salty and Sweet. I love the gritty guitar and beat, the playful vocal styles, and just the myriad of sounds that we got going on here. It's honestly a pretty slick pop rock combo with a unique flair that, you kind of come to expect from aespa. Karina and Giselle just work so well on instrumentals like this, and again, Ningning and Winter also add a great contrast to Karina and Giselle's vocal styles. That sort of melodic angle that they have really balances out a lot of aespa's songs. The guitar solo at the end is also just ridiculous in a fun way, and I think it just makes the song even more hype. Now, after 5 straight bangers in a row, it should be pretty smooth sailing from here on out, right? Unfortunately, this album has a bit of a problem that just kind of plagues a lot of aespa's releases. This is mainly in the fact that there's not very much cohesion after a certain point in a lot of aespa's projects. Even if the songs are good, there's not a lot that some of these tracks have to do with each other, on their past mini-albums at least, but it's also true for the second half of this record. Like, the last 5 songs on this thing sound like they came from a completely different project, even if most of them aren't that bad. BAHAMA is definitely one of the better examples of this lighter sound done well, featuring a sort of easy and breezy dance pop instrumental with a very melodic and catchy chorus. Now, I will say that Winter and Ningning absolutely shine here, which may be why they just switched instrumental styles so abruptly. However, I do feel like we could have had a bit more of a balance. Still, the light drums, guitars, and synth, they do work well for what they're trying to go for here. Long Chat is unfortunately one of the weaker moments on the project. It's not terrible, but just not really memorable. The beat has a very fun and crunchy bass line that for some reason reminds me of the Luigi's Mansion credits theme, but I'm just insane, so. It has a nice bounce to it overall, and I find the flow and composition to be fairly quirky and interesting. However, the biggest problem is that it just feels very simple and sparse compared to the first half of the record, which had very maximalist songs. Again, it's not terrible or anything like that, but I feel like it could have used a few more elements to at least kind of fit in with the rest of the album. It's just too bare bones to really make much of an impression. The next track, Prologue, is probably the only song on the record that I just kind of flat out don't like. This is when the lighter and more skeletal instrumentals really come back to bite them, making this track feel like an even more bare bones version of the previous song. It's just underwhelming, There's a bit of playfulness here, especially in the vocals during Winter's parts. However, this thing is just so limp, man. I guess the instrumental kind of fits the lyrics about feeling off and like you don't fit in, but man, I feel like they could have had a way more interesting backing instrumental to enforce these themes better. Live My Life. Now, this is just a straight up like pop rock, indie rock song. I guess it might be a bit rudimentary for the genre, but honestly, this one's really fun and sweet. The chorus is catchy as hell and honestly kind of evokes the same feelings as Stacy's Young Love in a way. The guitar has a nice clean tone to it, the balance of the more understated verses and the very anthemic chorus was also pretty nice, and aespa's vocals actually work pretty well on a track like this, weirdly. It's not going to be winning any awards for being experimental, that's for sure, but it is just a very solid and fun pop rock tune, and I think it also is a fitting climax for the lyrics of the project, with aespa kind of just realizing that they should live for themselves, live to have fun, and just do the best they can in their lives. They're realizing they just gotta be confident in who they are. Now, K-pop mini-albums and albums are no stranger to closing out with a ballad, and this is no different for this album. In fact, I'm pretty sure aespa does this on all of their projects, which in a way kind of makes this one less impactful because we're just so used to it at this point. It's honestly a pretty nice ballad, though. It features a very warm set of drums, piano, and guitar. However, again, it's just kind of something we've seen before. It's solidly put together, but I just don't think it's really fitting for either of the instrumental styles that this album tried to go for. This just kind of adds in making it a fairly unfitting end for the project as a whole. The girls still show off with their vocals here, which is nice, and it is a bit more engaging than your usual K-pop ballad at least. Overall, this was a pretty solid outing for a first debut record by aespa, even if it's kind of hilarious how obvious it is that this was most likely 2 projects just mashed together. Tracks 1 through 5 sound like they were from a sequel to Savage, meanwhile tracks 6 through 10 sound like they were from a dedicated summer mini-album. It's such an abrupt switch that it really comes off as a collection of tracks that were never really meant to come together. I love the first 5 songs. It just sounds like a great expansion of what they tried on Savage in my world. The production was fairly experimental, there were some great vocal performances here, and just the vibe that they created was a lot of fun. However, again, the album just falls into that usual aespa pitfall of lacking cohesion after a certain point. The last 5 songs are summer bops, and while most are decent, it just does not fit the vibe of the record, and they kind of pale in comparison to the first 5 songs. Honestly, if they cut this album in half and just made the first 5 songs a mini-album, it'd probably be one of aespa's best projects, if not the best aespa project. However, as much as I did enjoy my time listening to this record, having 2 total polar opposite instrumental styles on this thing really splinters the album as a whole and just prevents it from reaching the heights it could have had. I'm feeling a light 7 on this debut album by aespa because of this. Of course, we do still have to talk about album covers on this show, and this one is kind of one of the album cover styles that I have a hard time judging because, it's very much like an if you know album cover because, again, like the lore of some of the songs in this album states, they are essentially like these sort of alien or doppelgangers that are trying to like infiltrate Earth and replace the original aespa Invasion of the Body Snatchers style. But so in a way, this sort of like crop circle aesthetic makes sense, it has that nice green color scheme as well. It makes sense for the themes of the record, but it also doesn't really fit the sound very well. And I think if it doesn't really fit the other lyrics on the record because, those themes and that storyline is only present on some of these tracks. So in like the way the composition is, like the crop circle is kind of like being cut off on the left hand side too. Like, I don't know, I'm kind of mixed on this one, to be honest. But of course, those are just my thoughts on this newest album by aespa. What did you guys think? Do you think this was a pretty solid debut full-length album from them? Do you think this kind of captures a lot of what makes aespa great? Or are you hoping something a little more cohesive and, so these tracks maybe should have been split into 2 mini albums? Let me know. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, or I'll abduct you. And until the next one, wait, that could be misconstrued. I won't abduct you, don't worry. Until the next one, farewell.